can decide, you may decide.
You go ahead and slide that in your pocket.
Pocket, okay, thank you.
This can just go in your pocket.
I have a bucket for microphone
Thank you.
units. Sure. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Looks good.
Looks good.
Yeah, fine.
Give it to him.
All right, I think we're ready to go. Everybody ready? Don't worry, I'm just the person who's introducing the ambassador, so you can completely ignore me. I'm Larry Sabato, Director of the Center for Politics here at the university, and we wish you a good afternoon, and thank you for coming in despite the fantastic weather, but there was no space left on the lawn anyway, so we appreciate your being here. If you haven't been out to the lawn, it's a beach, as it always is when it turns warm. This is an Ambassador Series event focusing on the perspectives of the United States and Europe from the ambassadors of the Visegrad group. And I know you'll have some challenging questions for them, particularly the students in here, since you're being graded. It's a unique honor to host any ambassador to the grounds. After all, there's only one ambassador per country sent to the United States. And we have 4 here at once from Slovakia, Czechia, Hungary, and Poland. And I've been told, I haven't checked it with Steve, who's the real expert, but I've been told that this is unprecedented to have 4 ambassadors here. And if that's not true, it's unprecedented to have 4 ambassadors here on a warm end of March day. So I think I'm covered, and that will take care of it. And I wish a warm welcome on behalf of all of us to your excellencies, the Ambassador of Slovakia, Ivan Korchok, to the Ambassador of Czechia, Hinek Kmoníček, the Ambassador of Hungary, Laszlo Szabo, and the Ambassador of Poland, Piotr Wilczek. And if I mispronounced any name, you can call me Sabato for the rest of your life. All right, that's the least I can do. I hope I got it right. The planning for this day has been a team effort, and I want to recognize the Office of the Provost, and in particular, the Vice Provost for Global Affairs, Stephen Mull, who provided the impetus for this event. And you'll hear more about him in just a second because it's in my script and I've pledged to read all of it. We also recognize the Center for Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies, the European Studies Program, the Batten School, and the Miller Center, all of which contributed to this event. Special recognition goes to Damon Irby. Where's Damon Irby? There we go. Damon back there, who is, go ahead, applaud him. He is at the Center for Politics, our Director of Global Initiatives, and he leads the Center's Global Perspectives on Democracy program and has worked to bring many ambassadors here over the years. He has also worked to make the entire day here a success, and I think, Damon, we thank you for your incredibly high standards, which we see at every event. Today, we have the honor, as I mentioned, of interacting with the ambassadors of the Visegrad group. Perhaps the name of this group might be new to some in the audience. Of course, no one will admit that. That was a joke. Thank you. So the A's in my class just laughed. The others, less so. The Visegrad group was formed in February 1991 at a meeting of the presidents of Czechoslovakia, Poland, and the Prime Minister of Hungary at Visegrad, Hungary. And this harkens back to a similar meeting that took place a few years earlier in the year 1335. You don't hear a lot about that year. So now you know when that's a bonus question on your exams. 1335, you'll know what to say. I don't think a whole lot else happened that year. The formation of the 1991 group was motivated by the desire to eliminate the remnants of the communist bloc in Central Europe, to overcome historic animosities and develop cooperation and friendship among the nations. And those are great reasons to come together, and maybe you can help us getting our red states and blue states together here in the United States. We can learn from you. Finally, the moderator is the Honorable Stephen Mull, UVA's Vice Provost for Global Affairs. He is an ambassador too. Ambassador Mull arrived at the university this past summer following a 36-year career with the U.S. Department of State, during which he served as the U.S. ambassador to Poland and Lithuania. He was also acting undersecretary for political affairs, and he was lead coordinator for the Iran nuclear implementation. That should be interesting. I could go on and on about it, but fortunately the text ends here. And so I will be able to turn the floor over to you, Steve, as we all join together and thank these four excellencies for joining us on a very warm day at the University of Virginia. So let's give them an even warmer welcome to the University of Virginia.
Well, thank you very much, Larry, and thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon, and thanks to all of our co-sponsors for this really important event. And I'm just so thrilled to invite these four excellencies, as we call them in the diplomatic trade, to grounds here. These countries that these ambassadors represent were an inspiration to me throughout my lifetime. First, for their brave resistance to Soviet domination, and then for their dramatic victory over that domination beginning in 1989, and their success in building some of the most vibrant free market democracies in the world. Through that time, they also became important military allies of the United States, and they didn't hesitate to answer the call for help when America needed it after we came under attack on September 11th, 2001, providing proof first and foremost of the value of NATO to the United States. One of the most powerful memories I have from my time as ambassador to Poland is attending the funerals of Polish soldiers who died in defense of America's security. And between them, Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Slovakia sacrificed dozens of their soldiers in that conflict for our common defense. So at the outset, I want to thank these four countries, these four ambassadors, for their country's strong and enduring friendship for the United States. We're really honored to have you as our guests. As for our format today, I'll briefly introduce the ambassadors. Well, actually, Larry's already done that, so we can skip to that and get to the ambassadors. And I'll invite each of them to provide brief introductory comments, beginning with Ambassador Korczak of Slovakia, who leads the Visegrad group this year. After that, we will have an open discussion of some questions, including some that some of you submitted ahead of time, and then we'll open discussion to questions from the floor. We'll need to wrap up by about 4:30 so that our ambassadors can make their long drive back to Washington. So without further ado, Ambassador Korczak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Steve, for your kind words. I do want to thank, on behalf of our whole group, to your university for hosting us today. As it was mentioned, Visegrad, it's 4 countries cooperating together, and Slovakia, my country, the smallest out of those 4, is holding a presidency, a rotating presidency. Every year we are changing these presidencies, and I try to organize in Washington from time to time our meetings. But this is an experiment, because for the first time, if I remember correctly, 4 of us, we left Washington for a wonderful day, and we are also impressed for what we've seen here at this famous public university, UVA. If you're interested, then in a discussion can go more into details or even history with one of my colleagues of Visegrad, what it meant in the past, what it means today. But instead, I like to use my introductory remarks for a bit more, how should I say, pathetic or emotional remark. When I came here and we met in the morning, and Ambassador Mull, Steve, has briefed us how the day will go for us, he mentioned that later on during that day we will have an opportunity to see a piece of Berlin Wall. Yeah. So earlier in the morning he said we would have an opportunity to see a piece of Berlin Wall. And since that moment on I was very curious. Not that I have not seen Berlin Wall. I happen to be Slovak ambassador to Germany, so this picture of the wall remains always very vivid in my mind. But what I want to say that then when we approached it with my colleagues, I realized that this wall that you can see here and you are passing by, and maybe you are not realizing that this wall, this piece of concrete, has 2 sides. The one that for you maybe is a logical part of it with the graffiti, with the colors on it. But 4 of us, and the generations, many, many generations, we lived on the other side of that wall, which is gray, no colors, and in fact the whole generations, including my parents and myself up until I became 25, we lived on this gray part of the wall. And still when I realize that I can be here, I see you, a crowded room, and you showing interest for our country, it still seems for me, you know, like a miracle that I can be here. It is in this year that we celebrate 30 years of freedom that we regained in 1989. It is today for my country, March 29, when we became members of NATO. It has been a few days ago when the 3 countries, Czech Republic, Poland and Hungary, reminded them of the 20th anniversary of their accession to NATO. Always when I look at the wall, when I look at you, when I look at what I keep in mind, these anniversaries, it reminds me of the role that the United States has played after Second World War. Its support that was offered to us after 1989 to transformation, successful transformation of our country. And I will close my remarks by saying that of course I represent my country, Slovakia. I'm paid for that, mainly. But I'm a convinced transatlanticist. I happen to be, so to say, the head of our accession talks team on NATO. But I'm convinced of the need to keep this transatlantic bond together. And frankly, always when I have opportunity like this to speak to you, or be it in Boston and Chicago and New York and elsewhere, I'm trying to reach out to you and appeal to all of you. Please let us not this bond fall apart, because we are falling apart in a way. And I hope it would be to the detriment of the two sides of the Atlantic, because we are one. And the challenges that the American nation is facing are identical challenges that we are facing globally. And I don't think you would be better off if you want to change them, if you want to face those challenges just on your own. So let's stay together, and I'm so privileged to be here today, and I want to thank you and all your colleagues and staff for having us today. Thank you.
So I'm the next. I think that Ivan has already said everything, but if I may add something, not only as an ambassador, but also as a historian, the first story is about the Visegrad group, this alliance of 4 countries. As it was mentioned at the beginning, this alliance has been in existence for more than 600 years. I'm kind of joking, but I'm just trying to emphasize that our kingdoms worked together in the Middle Ages, and this is very natural for countries like the 4 of us to work together to pursue our goals. We are all members of the European Union. We work within the European Union, but we want to be stronger together. And that's actually the slogan we are using this year, Poland is using, to promote 100th anniversary of US-Poland diplomatic relations, which were established in 1919, stronger together with the United States as an ally, as our principal ally outside of the European Union. But as a Visegrad group, we just want to emphasize that we, as 4 countries, 4 very close friends, are stronger when we work together, also within Europe, within the European Union. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to emphasize is, I mentioned 100 years of Polish-American relations, but when I'm here at UVA, I'm thinking about more than 200 years of Polish-American relations, because here at this university, you celebrate until today great friendship between Thomas Jefferson and Tadeusz Kościuszko, a Polish revolutionary hero, hero of 2 nations, who was an engineer, who designed West Point and was a great friend of Thomas Jefferson. So we remember that Polish-American relations, it's not only 100 years, it's 250. That's actually what your ambassador in Warsaw told me some time ago, that our relationship, it's many, many times. So I think that it's good that our discussion will be both about relations with the US, our country's transatlantic relations with the United States, that are essential, as Ambassador Korczok said, very important for us. But I think that in current situation we should reevaluate, rethink, really discuss again many issues about relations between Europe and the US and our countries and the US. And this is also about our 4 countries, because this is an experiment. You usually host individual ambassadors. To have 4 ambassadors together is a real symbol of our friendship and alliance, and that we in Central Europe really want to work together with transatlantic relations and within the European Union.
Okay, you help me with the Czech perspective, so the Czech perspective of the same. I will have just 3 points. The first point is that who you are is basically dictated by the geopolitical position you have. So if you look at us, Czechs, you will find that for 1,100 years we live in the area which is completely surrounded by German-speaking countries. Technically, we started in Balkan area, but then we found our cousins a little bit short-tempered, so we moved north. And with that, our geopolitical position problem started. Because if you are a really small country, really nice, really good looking, and usually rich, and you have Germany on one side of your border and Russian grizzly not too far from the other side of your border, you can guess what will happen. You will be laughed and occupied most of the time. Luckily, everybody who occupied us, and we are usually occupied once in 20 years, like the country that much that it was never destroyed. But much of the Czech diplomacy, going back to the 9th century up to now, is to be explained very easy. If you happen to be a Western Slavic nation living in the island of German-speaking countries, and you want to stay who you are, you must be Western enough without becoming another Bavarian, and Slavic enough without ending up as a Russian. Because we are neither. And that's the Czech diplomatic dance. Point number 2, if you want to survive in such a demanding place, you need friends. The usual friends are your neighbors because they share the same nightmares with you. So, this is the Czech family. It's like any other family, this Visegrad family. It doesn't mean we do not quarrel. It doesn't mean we agree on everything, but on a very basic level, we think the same way because our policies and our geopolitical position dictates us who we are, and it's not that much different. The third point, the Czech-American relations. Last year, we celebrated 100 years of Czechoslovakia together with our Slovak brothers. What Americans usually do not realize is that Czechoslovakia was very much American creation. Our first president in the time when Czechoslovakia was created was living between Washington and Chicago. The first constitution we printed in Pittsburgh. And Czechoslovakia was not proclaimed in Prague. Few days before that was proclaimed in the typical Czech city called Philadelphia. So the Czech-American relations are absolutely crucial for us because you need not only your near family, you also need your family of values, and this is for us, the United States. With that, I think it's time for Hungarians.
Well, this is something hard to beat, obviously, but let me just tell you a few things Hungarians gave to the United States of America. First of all, Hollywood was mostly founded by Hungarians. Universal Studios, Paramount, parts of MGM, 20th Century Fox, these were all Hungarian Jews who emigrated in the 1920s. Californian winemaking was also started by a Hungarian called Count Ágoston Haraszti, who also built the first jail in California. So we're very proud of him. And Buena Vista Winery, which was the first winery in Sonoma Valley and in California, was founded by him. Unfortunately, he later was eaten up by crocodiles in Latin America. So,
Typical Hungarian fate.
Of course, what can you do? Also, another nice thing about our collaboration that Hungarians invented the atomic bomb. They designed the 4T model. They designed the ballpoint pen, the safety match, and I could go on forever. Hungarians have one of the highest number of Nobel Prizes per capita in the world. So we are very proud of our inventions, but we really suck at marketing and sales. So that's why the synergies and the opportunities are obvious. Now, in terms of the V4, The Visegrad 4 collaboration has never been this strong as it is today. It was really created to help our accession to the European Union. But I believe it was Woody Allen who said, I would never join a club that would take me as a member. So, no, this is just a joke. But quite clearly, we have our quarrels and debates, not only between us, but with the European Union as well. And I believe many of the problems we face today are reflected here in the United States as well. So I think this creates us a very good ground for debate and discussion. But let me just state you, because this is something you don't really read in the press in the United States. The Visegrad 4 collaboration is the third strongest exporter from the European Union. Together, we have 65-ish million people in these 4 countries with very similar development stage, view on the world, very similar history and very strong cultural commonalities between our countries. If you look at the trade between Germany and France, obviously this is 2 major economic powers in Europe. These 4 countries have 70% higher trade than Germany and France between them. So we believe we have a lot of power. Quite clearly, we are much stronger united. And I also have to mention that it's also a not well-known fact that the best friends of the United States in Europe are the Visegrad 4 countries. Please quote me on it. I can argue why. I believe all these nice gentlemen can argue why. If you look at the energy security of Europe, if you look at the situation between the West and Russia, if you look at the situation between the West and China, and I could go on forever, these are really the best allies of the United States. So I believe we cannot have enough attention. And of course, the United States can count on us as well on the eastern flank of the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ambassador.
Just one thing. I just wanted to emphasize that we are not going to announce the establishment of a new country consisting of these 4. Will remain 4 countries after this meeting. So,
excellent. So this year we're marking, it's hard to believe it's been 30 years, but 30 years have gone by since the end of communism in your countries. I was wondering if each of you could reflect, what are the accomplishments of that period that you're most proud of in your countries, and what are your biggest disappointments?
Who should start?
you.
Yeah. Well, in my view, major accomplishment in those 30 years is a successful transformation from what we were before, because it is unprecedented to turn communism into capitalism. The other way around, communists have tried before. But I think if you look at what our countries have achieved within those 30 years, I believe we can be proud. So without going too much into details, I would call it a successful transformation, because it's not automatic. You know, communism fell across Europe. If you look in other regions in Europe, in Western Balkans, there were wars, you know, afterwards. If you look on the east of our Slovak and Polish border, Ukraine, you see what's going on there. But these 4 countries and other Central European countries, I think we successfully managed with this huge challenge of transforming our society. And imagine just to turn the planned and centralized economy into market economy, the massive process of privatization, you know, with everything. And today, I think 4 of us, we can speak of economic success for the first time, I think, in all our countries. But in Slovakia, imagine we have a problem, we have a mental challenge to all of a sudden see that we have a shortage of labor force. For 20, 25 years, for our people, it was how to find a job, more or less, because we started in the 90s with 20% of unemployment. Now we are less than 5%. Czech Republic is 2.5%, and I don't know. So within those 30 years, I would sort of say, call the transformation of the most successful part of it. Disappointment, look, not everyone is happy. You still have people who are dreaming of those times before because they felt more secure in terms of social security and those kind of things. Capitalism as such is not, of course, ideal, but it is, with democracy, I think it's the best out of all options. But it does have sacrifice as well. Two, we cannot simply ignore the fact that all of a sudden we see an increase of populism, you know, of people who all of a sudden are running around and offering simplistic solutions to very complex issues, and they're getting ground, they're getting traction in our countries. I believe the problem behind it, and I'll stop here, is that too many things in the last 2 or 3 decades are all of a sudden taken for granted. When I speak to my 2 sons, 25 and 21, I try to explain them that my heart is still beating high when I'm crossing the border between Slovakia and Austria. It tells them nothing. We are the only country that has euro, the common currency. My sons are living in Germany. They don't care about it. That's not an issue. And you can go, you know, through the whole life, in fact, and you see that people are disconnecting, I think, the most important parts and values of democracy, and they cannot understand and directly link it to prosperity and security. There is this problem, you know, a disconnect between democracy and prosperity and security. So we are becoming, I think, we see that we are a normal part of Western societies with all the problems that we are facing at this moment, and Western democracies, I mean, in Western Europe, but including here in the United States. But I think it's the transformation and sort of normalcy that we are experiencing right now. Thank you.
So, as usual, the Slovak ambassador, you know, said everything. But I see now one difference. He said something like, we are the only country, I understand, in this group which is in the Eurozone. So this is one difference. Slovakia, you know, is in the Eurozone, so they have, you know, this European currency with a number of other EU countries. Our countries decided not to join Eurozone, and I think in Poland it will be still a long process. There is a huge support for the European Union membership in Poland. It's about 88% of the population. At the same time, for various reasons, we are not very enthusiastic about Euro. But we are very enthusiastic about EU. There is, for our countries, the 15th anniversary of joining the European Union, and which, you know, actually we are talking about 30 years and 15 years. So like in the middle of this process, we joined the European Union, our countries, and I think that, again, the Visegrad group, because I want to emphasize the Visegrad group all the time, was very instrumental, very important as a kind of, again, alliance of these countries to help us to join the European Union. In 2004, this was of crucial importance, and when people are asking me, even very high-ranking officials in this country, would you leave the EU? I would say, of course not, because EU is, we joined the West, we joined the Western world in a very, not only symbolic way, but as a single market, and it's very, very beneficial for Poland. And so in Poland, you mentioned the Berlin Wall. I wanted to mention solidarity because as a Pole I should mention solidarity. You know, this famous trade union, it all started in 1980. We survived the martial law, imposed by the communists in 1981, at the end of 1981, and we're struggling for freedom, I mean, in Poland for a number of years. I think that even people in this room who went through this, who emigrated to the US, I can see a few faces. So for us, you know, with all due respect to the Berlin Wall, I think we have only this very central European symbol, which is solidarity. Now solidarity means something different. It's also solidarity between our countries. It's solidarity in the European Union. But solidarity means also differences. And I think we'll discuss the European Union later, and we may discuss some of these issues. But so that's more or less what I wanted to add.
Well, from our perspective, the main thing which we got from this historical change was peace of mind. Because I must explain one thing. We Czechs, and it probably goes for all of us, expected us to be every time part of the Western Europe. For us, it was unimaginable that one day we will be on the other side of the fence. Even in socialist Czechoslovakia, we had the feeling that we are in the wrong club. We had a relatively very solid level of consumption, in a way. We were joking that time, what is the difference between Switzerland and socialist Czechoslovakia? And the correct answer was there is almost no difference. In both countries, there is freedom of speech. Just in Switzerland, there is also freedom after the speech. But with all that luxury or relative luxury of our life, we felt deeply unhappy. We felt, I would quote Milan Kundera, culturally invaded. It was the Eastern cultures who came to us and started preaching us something what we found colorful, oriental, and stupid, which was very Western point of view. So the biggest achievement of these changes is that we finally arrived home, because Western Europe was our home culturally all these hundreds and hundreds of years, with the exception of last 75, when we were kidnapped to the East to enjoy a little bit of colorful Orientalism. What is the main thing which didn't happen as it should happen? Probably one thing. There is a lot still to be done, and there is not enough of the revolutionary spirit. The beginning of the 90s, everything was possible. It was the time when one day I was 27 years old, musician who never spoke a word of English, never seen a computer, and have never been abroad. 6 years later, I was the permanent representative of the Czech Republic to the United Nations. How that can happen? But what really didn't go that well as we expected to go is one thing. At least for my generation, there was a very strong connection between freedom and Europe. The more European you are, the more free you are. And that connection, and it's not against the European Union or even against the European Commission, is getting loose now. Suddenly I hear people saying, so we do not have Soviet Politburo, we have European Commission. Again, somebody is bringing me something what limits my freedom. And it really starts breaking this connection between being European means being free. The more European you are, the more free you are. And that's one thing which years back we did not expect.
Thank you. I would like to build on my colleagues' comments. We did not join the West. We actually rejoined the West quite clearly, historically, culturally, civilization-wise, when you look at the Judeo-Christian heritage, we grew up for 1,000 years, basically. We've always belonged to Europe, so there's no question about it. Also, what my Polish colleague mentioned, when it comes to the support of the European principles, I believe these countries are the strongest supporters of the European principles. However, we do have our challenges and questions about Brussels, because right now the current leadership is confusing us. Since we did live under the Soviet occupation, for us it's strange when the president of the European Union visits a small German town that was the birthplace of Karl Marx and pays his respect at the sculpture of Karl Marx. This is a little bit too much for us. Of course, for someone who never lived in communism, it's an easy thing to do. For someone who ever lived in communism, they don't want to pay their respect to Karl Marx and his followers. Obviously, for us, the current leadership became a little bit more politicized, and powers are kind of being pulled back, centralized. This is something we don't like. And I believe when it comes to sovereignty and really coming to the principles of Europe, we believe Europe should be really a strong unification of these nations that are strong nations on themselves. You cannot take away what comes with us for the last 100 or 1,000 years or 1,100 years. It's us. We don't want to change our identity, but we want to have a strong Europe. So this is all our desire. These days I'm being asked questions from friends from Britain, from France, how they can ask for asylum in Hungary, which is a nice thing to have. But we really want to make sure that Europe stays as strong as possible and grows as strong as possible. And there's no better and stronger friendship between two continents than the United States and Europe. So I believe it's all our interest, our mutual interest, to make this stronger. Thank you.
Ambassador Korczak, one of the great honors I had in my diplomatic career was sitting in the hall with Secretary Madeleine Albright the day on March 12th, 1999, when Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined NATO. And of course, Slovakia followed 5 years later. And in the years since then, there's a growing community of analysts who say that perhaps it was a mistake to enlarge NATO, that it was needlessly provocative to the Russians. Are they wrong? And what do you think NATO's purpose should be today?
Yeah. I think they are wrong. And I'll try to offer you my answer to it, why. But I feel inspired by what my colleagues have said about us, in fact, being always part of the West, which is true, and that after 1989, we were just rejoining the West. I absolutely agree. However, I think is important at this very moment is to know what the West is, because we never escaped the West in terms of our belonging to the cultural heritage and the religion and the culture. I think that was extremely important. For me, however, the West does not represent geography, but rather a certain type of governance which has brought us, after 1989, prosperity and security. And I think these days the West is challenged when it comes to our ability to protect this governance based on democratic principles. And it is attacked and challenged by the powers from outside, but also internally, as I said, by the populists. So I think the notion of West, I believe, requires also this dimension of our belongings to it and how we understand it. Now about NATO, well, of course, I believe it's wrong to say that we have provoked Russia back then in 1999 when my friends and their countries joined, and in 2004 when we became members. Because NATO membership was, in my view, a logical consequence of what happened in 1989. It was part of our emancipation politically. We wanted to become part of Western institutions, and that's, first of all, NATO and European Union. Of course, it has never meant back then, and it does not mean it is now, that our armed forces or our missiles are directed on Russia. The problem for Russia, I think, when it comes to perception of NATO, is to understand that they are not anymore deciding on the destinies of free nations. So that's the problem, I think, for Russia, just to digest what happens. And I don't want to overdo it with this, because I believe we all want to have a good relationship with Russia. We are absolutely in favor of it. Nevertheless, when you look at those 30 years since 1989 and since we joined, my perception is that while NATO is projecting stability and has projected stability into its neighborhood, including into our countries, Russia is projecting fear and instability in its neighborhood. And just look at Ukraine, look at Georgia, and if you see this, then I think this is an evidence for us that our choice to become member of NATO was the right choice. Once again, that was not directed against anybody, not against Russia. But the problem is, once again, that the Russian leadership, even at this moment, simply cannot digest the changes that happen, and the fact that we want to, once again, decide about where we want to belong. So, but I can speak endlessly about NATO, because, as I said, I was privileged to lead our NATO negotiations. It was, by the way, political process, politically driven. There were not conditions to buy F-16s, you know, before you join NATO. Slovakia has decided to buy F-16 last year, but there was no such precondition for us to become a member of NATO. The only precondition was to show that we are committed to democracy. Of course, we are contributing now, all our countries, to the missions. We are fighting side by side with the NATO allies and with the United States in Afghanistan, in other countries in the world. And NATO, in my view, I'll stop here, still serves the purpose for which it was created in 1949. And I'm so glad that next week all of us will be in Washington when our ministers come, and we will celebrate the 17th anniversary of this most successful alliance in the history of democratic states. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ambassador Konicek, one of our students asked, what is it that unites the four Visegrad countries together, and what sets you apart from the rest of the European Union?
Yeah, I think that's a good provocative question, which invites Ambassador to be undiplomatic. So what unites us, obviously, is our geopolitical position, because it, as I've said, partly dictates your national interests. What unites us is our common history. Three of us were part of the Austrian Habsburg Empire for 300 years. Poland was not.
We were
partly you were, yeah. What unites us is, and it's like the game every time 3+1 in Visegrad. So 3 countries were Austrian Habsburg, 1 was partly. What unites us is a Slavic language. 3 we have it, Hungarians don't. And here you see that every time there is a great potential what can bring us together, but this potential can never be limitless. I agree with Piotr, we will never end up as one country.
Unless it's Poland, of course.
And here we go, that's the elephant in the room. Because let's be frank, the main thing we need from Visegrad is to speak the same voice in the Brussels. If we are united 65 million in Brussels, with 70% more of the exchange than French-German machinery, we do matter. much more than any one of us without the others. Now, to have this alliance, you need a big kid in the room, Poland. It's 5 million, 10 million, 5 million, nothing. 10. 40. Okay. So the limit and end of the limits of Visegrad I call the Polish tango. The Polish tango goes like that. We unite, which makes all of us big, and Poland super big in Brussels. In that moment, Poland usually changes the government, and the new government says, I'm too big for you guys. I don't want to be the biggest one in Visegrad 4. I want to be part of the Weimar 3 with Germany and France. You get disappointed every time.
And then welcome home.
Yeah?
Welcome
and we
home.
embrace you home, because without you, we don't exist. That's Visegrad.
Thanks very much. So, Ambassador Sabato, one of my colleagues pointed out a problem with all of us here on the stage. We're all men. So I want to ask, what does that mean for the prospect of women having a career in diplomacy? And generally speaking, what's the status of women in the Visegrad states?
Or in Hungary.
Well, the good news is that in most of our countries we have 50% women and 50% men. So that's a good start, I believe. And my predecessor was a female ambassador, and in New York we have the permanent representative for the UN as a female as well. And I believe many of my colleagues have female partners in their diplomatic ranks. We have actually more female diplomats than men, and when I look at the disposition of males and females in the Hungarian diplomatic corps, I would say it's about 50-50. So there's no discrimination. It just happens to be at this time 4 men representing the V4, but this doesn't have a message at all. While we are talking about women, I would like to tell a few words about demographics in Europe. Because I think, just like most Western democracies, the population is actually declining in most of Europe. For this reason, we actually established a quite nice incentive for families to have more kids. So we are very proud. We just made the news 1 month ago when the Prime Minister announced that if you are a woman who delivered 4 babies, you will be tax exempt for the rest of your life. Also, if you have a family of on average salaries with 3 kids, you practically pay no taxes anymore in Hungary. So we are enjoying this new momentum, and I'm very happy to say that in the last 8 years, since 2010 until 2008, the number of marriages went up by 46% in Hungary. The number of divorces went down by 20%. The fertility rate went up by 22%, and the number of abortions went down by 25%. So we are very, very proud of that. So when it comes to women, we still have one inheritance from the socialist times, what we are happy about. Women can stay home with their kids for up to 3 years on a paid leave. If the woman has to pursue a career, the husband can stay home. And now the new announcement came that the grandparents can stay home with the kids on a paid leave also if the 2 parents want to pursue a career. We are struggling with the same as all other countries here. In 2010, we were struggling to find jobs for the people. Now we are struggling to find the people for all the jobs that are being created. That's why I'm very happy to say that all these 4 countries have very strong vocational schooling system, very strong universities, vocational schools, and we enjoy a lot of attention by the United States. Thousands of companies are invested in our countries because we seem to be at the right spot right now. The technological and scientific development of the countries is very strong. The cost base is still relatively low. That's what makes us a very reliable and good investment location for US companies.
Thanks very much. Ambassador Korczak, today, I'm sorry.
No, Korczak.
Sorry?
Oh, no. So, Ambassador Korczak, today was supposed to be Brexit Day. It's been delayed for a little while. As some of you mentioned during the course of the day, there's sometimes a tension with Brussels that perhaps Brussels has adopted too much control, as Ambassador Komonicek has said. Where do you see the EU headed as an organization over the next 5 years? Do you think there's a risk of more Brexits?
Well, this is a question for a seminar or for a 6 months course about the future of European Union. One word about Brexit. I think I can speak on behalf of our group here that we all regret that they're leaving. It's a major loss for European Union. On the other hand, you know, with referendum, and I remember it vividly because it was 3 days before we took over our Slovak EU presidency on June the 26th, 2016, we have to respect the choice of British people and their citizens. It's a democratic choice. You can question, you know, what kind of campaign it was that led to no at the end. But for me, it's an evidence that, you know, in democracy, people are free to make bad choices. So it's we will, however, see what the consequence there will be for the United Kingdom. It should be today. So March 29, 15 years of our membership. Tomorrow we have presidential elections in Slovakia. For the first time, 95%, I have to be careful, we will have a female president. A lady will most probably win. So the country is changing in these terms as well. So that's about Brexit, the future of European Union. Look, I think we are now at the end of a decade which was so much influenced and determined by one whole series of crises. When I came to Brussels in 2009 as ambassador, they sent me there from Berlin. On day one, the financial crisis, which started here, then was imported in a way to Europe as well. Euro, common currency, almost fell apart. Then we've been struggling for 3 years to try to save it and rescue. And then we thought, all right, we have it under control. Russians have invaded Ukraine. They're dismantling the post-World War order. So up until now, we have not managed to help Ukrainians regain their sovereignty and renew it. Then we thought, okay, sanctions, and we continue in a sync with the United States. Fine. And then migration broke out, you know. We lost completely control of our external borders. There were 1 million people who were pouring in through Hungary, by the way, and then further to Germany, which has divided Europe both politically and people in those most affected countries like Germany, you know, the people became very uncertain what it means, you know, this migration. Today you have 6 to 8 million Africans who are standby and they're ready to set into motion and move. Where they will be going? They will be going to Europe. So you had a 1 decade of crisis. So I think what will decide about the future of European Union will be to what extent we will be able to finish this unfinished business, Euro, migration, you know, Russian aggression. Number 2, I think we will see a lot already in 2 months in the elections to European Parliament, where we will see to what extent the populistic parties will make it into European Parliament. And 2, I believe it will be important how we will be able to cope with
2 years ago.
With Brexit. I hope there will not be chaos, but today, while we were here, I received a notification that the British Parliament has refused even the 3rd attempt to approve their withdrawal treaty. So I don't know what comes next. But at the end of the day, and I agree with my colleagues with all the remarks, that people all of a sudden see as Brussels would take too much of our sovereignty. I think it is so important to reach out and explain to our people what European Union is bringing to us. And from our Slovak perspective, it has no alternative. I dare say we will not see further exits or sort of Brexits, other countries, because they are learning the lesson as we speak with the United Kingdom. Many in this country are regretting and changing their minds on it. So I am pretty optimistic that we will prevail, but we have to address those issues from the unfinished business in the EU.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Vilcek, you'll remember that President Trump took office a couple of years ago vowing to be a disruptive force in America and in the world. And I think there are very few people who wouldn't agree that that's at least one promise he has kept. What has been the impact of the Trump administration's foreign policy on relations with the Visegrad states, and more broadly on the transatlantic relationship?
I think in this group I have this privilege to have served as ambassador since day one, because I arrived 2 days before the presidential election in 2016. So I think I'm, in this sense, the oldest ambassador among us in Washington. And this was an exceptional experience, because I arrived, as I said, 2 days before the election, and on the day of my arrival, everyone was expecting, in Washington at least, something else, also in Poland. I was being prepared in detail for the presidency of Hillary Clinton, actually in Warsaw, but this happened, and it changed a lot. Many of my friends in the diplomatic corps lost their friends. I had no friends in Washington, so I had to look for friends anyway. So
you have us.
So I was. There were some people who were so unwilling, so disgusted to go to the White House, to NSC, to meet all these new people. I had no choice. I had to meet something. I had to make friends. So I was kind of quite efficient at the beginning, with the help of my colleagues in the embassy, to reach out, to meet with the new administration, with new people, the new national security advisors. Now there's the third one, during my tenure as ambassador, which is not unusual. There were, under previous presidencies, there were many changes on this position as well. But what I'm going to say is that, for my point of view, is that, of course, the presidency of Donald Trump is surprising and challenging, and it's a completely new approach. But at the same time, for us as diplomats, I understand for all my colleagues, our duty is to deal with this administration, to work with this administration, and as we work with any government, in any capital where we are posted. So I think our approach is more, I would say, rational than some people in this country, because we just work with governments. So and I think, especially in the case of Poland, but I think also all our countries, or most of our countries, we should say that nothing has changed, fortunately. The Polish-American cooperation, and I believe Visegrad-American cooperation, is very good. This administration recognizes us as a group of countries with which they want to be in conversation, in ongoing dialogue. So again, as you may remember, the first ever bilateral visit of President Trump to a European country was to Poland. But it was not only to Poland, it was to see 12 presidents of the region, including our presidents, because the visit was about a new format, a new alliance in Central Eastern Europe, which is called the Three Seas Initiative. So it's not only our 4 countries, but also the 3 Baltic countries and some countries in the south, like Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Slovenia, etc. So, so the president decided, and he was encouraged to come to Poland to see presidents of 12 Central European countries, and this was his first visit. So we were, in a sense, privileged to be the first destination. And since then, the cooperation has been very good in energy, energy security, in defense. It's just continued. So from our perspective, you know, this administration is a good partner. I'm very serious. We are not really supposed to make comments. We are not journalists. We are not political analysts. You know, from the point of view of my work, this is a very good cooperation with the State Department, National Security Council, the White House. So it works, which does not mean that you don't have concerns as citizens. You know, we know how divisive this presidency is in a way. And we experience in many countries, also in Europe, all such divisions. But, you know, speaking in a pragmatic way, this has been a really good, pragmatic, realistic cooperation, as I said, in defense, energy cooperation, in many, many other fields. You know.
Can I say something on it? I agree entirely with Piotr. He is the head of state here, President Trump, and what your concerns of American citizens are, we take note of it, but for us, the United States remains extremely important country. It is a fact that under his administration, we see a more intensive and active re-engagement with Central Europe, as Piotr has pointed to, and that's very important, because I can tell you one thing. You mentioned Madeleine Albright. In February, Secretary Pompeo visited 3 countries, Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia. I accompanied him. And when he spoke to students at the university in Slovakia, I only then realized that there has not been US Secretary of State in Slovakia for 20 years. So you a little bit pulled out from there because you thought, thanks to successful transformation, it's all done. That's not the case, and I believe this link to Central Europe is extremely important. Last remark I want to make, however, on top of what Piotr has said, there are divergences. There are divergences between us, between Europeans, and the United States approach to foreign policy, because it's just stating the obvious that this administration prefers more unilateral approach than the Europeans, while we are more committed to finding, multilateral solutions. So there were important and bold decisions in terms of foreign policy made by President Trump. You pulled out from Paris, you pulled out from JCPOA, the Iran deal, and I can continue like that. So there are differences. But as I said at the beginning, that must not prevent us, Europeans and Americans, in engaging in a strategic debate. Because if you believe that by imposing tariffs on cars, you will better serve your interests, that's wrong. That's not the way how we can find a solution and how to deal with China as a major trade challenge to us. So maybe I was a bit less diplomatic than
no, you just added, this more difficult, part
because we have to be open.
Yeah,
come on. There are divergences, yes, but they must not prevent us, as I said, in engaging in a strategic discussion between the United States and Europe.
What I may add to what Ivan said is, you mentioned China. I think that when we talk with some politicians in this country, and when they say EU and China are going to do something to us, EU and China. So it's so difficult to explain to some of these politicians that the European Union and China are two different entities. And but I'm quoting. I'm not saying that. So it's about trade wars. It's about competition. But we still that's what we are concerned about, and I just agree with the ambassador that we should emphasize that the European Union and the United States is a transatlantic alliance and Western values, and China is a different problem. You know, when we just discuss trade and you mention in one sentence EU and China as a danger for the United States, this is actually, you know, a problem for us. You know.
Together we are stronger as transatlantic community. That's all.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Kmonicek, the U.S. Support for the establishment of liberal democracies in Central Europe, in your countries in particular, was considered one of the biggest accomplishments of U.S. foreign policy in the 1990s. More recently, there's been a lot of attention to the promulgation in your region of so-called illiberal democracy and reported pressures on universities, judicial independence, and freedom of the press. Can you say, are your countries in fact considering alternatives to liberal democracy?
I think none of us ever considered any alternative to liberal democracy. One sentence to follow the colleagues for previous topic. The main thing which we get from the Trump administration is the attention. And I will quote Mike Pompeo. They asked him, why the hell do you go to Bratislava? Yeah. And his response was, because I counted. Secretary of State was not in Bratislava for 20 years. At the same time, US Secretary of State visited Paris 47 times.
47 times.
End of quote. Back to your question, I like quoting, so I will answer with a quoting. Again, we never considered, none of us, any alternative to liberal democracy. And frankly, do I see the problem with the growing xenophobia, with the identity crisis, with the migrants wave? I do. Do I see the problem with a lot of the politicians in our way too complicated world speaking to people for whom the word is too complicated and giving them simplistic solutions and getting their votes for it? Yes, I do. At the same time, I feel that it's a little bit academic narrative which goes like that. Former communist countries got rich in European Union and now they are sliding back from liberal into illiberal democracy. And it's really hard to measure what is liberal and what is illiberal. So I will use the only measure I know which we used in the in the United Nations, which is the very complicated chart, very precise, how to measure liberalism done by the US Bar Association. On the last list, the sliding down of our countries, the Czech Republic came as number 18, 18th most liberal country in the world. Number 19 was France, probably in danger of us. Number 20 was the United States. Obviously, Poland has a problem sliding back in the chart. Hungary had it, but Poland went low to the position 24 most liberal country in the world. If this is the danger for the cradle of democracy, Greece, who finally got to position 46 in the same chart, there must be something wrong with my mathematics. So I do accept there is a problem. And it must be addressed properly, because otherwise it grows. And nobody of us wants it. At the same time, this label of illiberal democracies, I really feel a little bit as a campaign style, which is tool in a discussion, which is the real discussion. And the real discussion is not about liberal and illiberal democracies in Europe. The real discussion is what kind of animal are we building called European Union? Is it the United States of Europe? Or is it the relatively loose union of the same economies glued together by German-supported Europe. And these are two absolutely different concepts. This is the basic discussion which is ahead of Europe. It will be probably the main discussion to structure what Europe will be in 20, 25 years. Brexit is a small part of it. Labeling someone as an illiberal is the second tool in that game. Yes, I would say there is a problem, and I think each of us can understand our own problems and finds the creative way how to solve it. The last sentence, for example, in my country, for a long time we waited in the political scene to find the Czech nationalist. It's relatively hard to be the Czech nationalist if it's not for ice hockey, because we are so racially mixed that it's very hard to say what makes you Czech if it's not the language. Sometimes I joke we are more the language club than the nation. So we waited for the Czech nationalism to appear, and now illiberal tendency, we have one. We have a nationalist party, typically called Party of the Direct Democracy. The leader would probably claim Czech for Czechs only, and he himself is half Japanese, quarter Korean. That's a typical Czech way of the illiberal tendencies. If you find it threatening, suit yourself. I find it funny, problematic, disturbing, and we know how to deal with it.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So I'd like to open the floor for questions from the floor. I think we have a couple of mics circulating. So if you have a question for our panel, please put up your hand and someone with a microphone will find you. So here.
Here. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Up here in front? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, lady. Yeah, Mike is coming.
Mike is coming, yeah.
Like who?
Najpierw bardzo miło mi. Byłam nauczycielka dla Korpusu Pokoju w Polsce 21 lat temu w Jarocinie. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Poland 21 years ago. I am interested, I try to follow the news in Poland and in Polish, but with so much drama going on here, it's hard to keep up with. And I understand that there is something going on right now with the teacher strike, and I would like more information about that.
Well, actually, I hardly heard what you said.
Yes.
I mean,
We
sorry.
couldn't hear.
So what's the question? I mean,
So there's a teacher strike in Poland right now?
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that? I've been reading about it in Polish, but it's hard for me to follow.
So,
And how does that affect?
okay, so there is, this is not the first teacher strike in Poland. Teacher strikes are usually every few years, always before the elections, always run by, a very special teachers union, which is very political. So no one denies that, teachers are not very well paid, as the salaries are quite low as teachers and doctors. What is very concerning that it's like 1 month or 1.5 before any elections, there is a teacher strike, and usually it's before final exams in high schools. So so this is what I understand. This is not about Polish-American relations, so I have no instructions from Warsaw. But seriously, this is what happens, because in Poland most schools are state schools, are public schools subsidized by the state, and I think, in my opinion, with no instructions, this is a great tension between the government and local governments who are supposed to support schools using government subsidies. So the real tension is, and because the government and local governments are basically differ politically, so I see this conflict as a conflict between local governments, who are many of them not supporting the government politically, but getting funding from the government. So that this is very political. That's what I wanted to say, and how it's a kind of blackmail included, that there will be no final exams at schools, so parents are included in this debate. So this is a part of a very heated debate in Poland before the May European elections and the fall elections to the national parliament. So I'm reading the news like you do, and this is my assessment, more or less, of the situation. But I have nothing wise to say about that. Yeah.
Thank you. In the back.
Oh, hi there. I know you touched on this earlier, but I was wondering if you thought there was any eventuality of the UK remaining inside of the European Union. And if not, what did you think relationships would be like between your countries and the UK after Brexit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not the question for us. I can improvise. Speaking on behalf of Slovakia, that would be great if they reconsider it. That would be the way how to keep them in. But again, it's for Theresa May, as long as she is still the Prime Minister, and we don't know. But should they leave, I can tell you that Slovakia's position and Visegrad position will be to keep the relationship of the United Kingdom outside of the EU as close as we can, or as it used to be before. The United Kingdom is an extremely important strategic investor in Slovakia, in other countries. Our interest is that they are in a way, or remain in a way, integrated in internal market, because internal market in European Union, what it means? Free flow of persons, goods, capital, and services. They're building huge plants in Slovakia, automotive industry. And we need to keep those flows, going all the time. So in no way there will be approach, at least on behalf of Visegrad, that we would like to punish the United States or the United Kingdom for their decision to leave. But the best option, in my view, and I can say that publicly, that they stay.
But at the same time, we have very good and efficient relations with Switzerland and Norway. I mean, there are countries in Europe outside of the EU, and cooperation works. So the problem now, we have a huge crisis now, and we'll see what the solution will be. We'll see in the next few weeks, I hope. And well, this is a crisis, but as we have relations with countries in Europe and not in Europe, good trade relations, it will be settled. But we are in the middle of a huge crisis, so it's very difficult to at least for me, to make any comments or any suggestions.
They will stay Europeans even outside of European Union.
Yeah.
Touché.
Thanks. Apologies to you, ma'am. I know we had one before you in the back. So, yes, sir.
The trade deficit with Germany, I think, is $65 billion. The trade deficit, American trade deficit with the EU is about $150 billion. So, according to the New York Times, the tariff barriers for the EU are significantly higher than the U.S. So, doesn't it make sense that the U.S. should be aggressive on the trade talks?
I couldn't hear.
We cannot hear. I mean,
The
size of a trade
EU deficit, trade deficit with the United States is. We run a very substantial trade deficit with Europe. So shouldn't the United States, in fact, be aggressive in trying to close that deficit?
But that's not true that you're running a huge trade deficit. If you include services, you are in a surplus. That's what we keep on hearing all the time, that that there is a huge trade deficit and you're suffering because you're losing jobs. But look at the figures. Look at the fact that the European investments here are creating thousands and hundred thousands of jobs here, and I think you barely can be more aggressive, by the way, when it comes to trade with the European Union, because for the first time, all of a sudden, our great ally, United States, has imposed tariffs on steel and aluminium. Mm-hmm. Now we hear that the reason to impose tariffs on cars is that's the threat to national security. How can we threaten the U.S. national security when Germans are producing all their SUVs in North Carolina that we don't understand? I'm sorry, I'm very open, I'm not diplomatic. But that's not the way how we should use the potential of the world's largest trade area that we could create together. And I can understand, however, concerns here in this country because of huge structural changes in our economies. You are losing jobs here because of technology change and the IT and the information technology, everything, the structural change. But don't believe that that's not happening in Europe. Slovakia is the world's largest car producer per capita. But I know what concerns Germans have who are producing the cars in Slovakia and how difficult political problem that is in Germany. But there is no way that somebody would come up with an idea to impose tariffs on cars and to deal with the once again, structural changes in economy in that protective way. And I'm here very open on it.
A small Czech example why tariffs is usually not the way how to make things better. When tariffs on steel were introduced, obviously we were a little bit affected because we do not sell much of the steel here, but we do. So to protect your national interest and security, you impose tariff on the Czech steel, and we sell it to the only entity here in the United States, US Army.
Yeah.
So US Army buys the same steel from us, just 20% more, because we are the only one on this planet who makes this type of steel. Tariff war.
We don't need this.
So, frankly, after that, I went laughing like a squirrel to the hill and explained to a few congressmen that it's a very funny exercise how you were hunting for Chinese and got yourself.
Yeah. Well, with that, I'm maybe time for one short question.
Yes,
ambassadors? All right, so please.
Well, I have a two-pronged question, and it's not short, but then it's up to their excellencies to decide what they want to answer. The first one has to do with NATO, and I was wondering whether you might agree that the European members of NATO have for years benefited one-sidedly from this alliance, the United States carrying the bigger burden. And recently, President Trump's appeal for EU-NATO members to kind of share more of a burden has been misinterpreted as him being against the NATO alliance. Do you really agree with that or not? The second question has to do with recent political trends in the United States towards socialism. I spent half of my life in a socialist environment, and I dread the horrors of this socialism coming to this country. I may feel like I'll have to emigrate if that happens. So my question is, if the United States were to become a socialist country, how would that affect the Visegrad countries' relations, if at all, to the United States? Thank you.
Hinek, it's you.
Okay, so I will start. Okay, first, I do not believe there is any place for the real socialism in the United States. Exactly. There I am with Trump. This is not a socialist country. How it is constructed, it can never be. It has a lot of the socialist tendencies. I see it here as well growing, but no real danger. On your first question, 2% of GDP, which we didn't pay to NATO, yes, we were on the wagon for free. More complicated story. With our economy growing 3-4% every year, it doesn't mean that we do not spend every year more and more and more on our defense and as our contribution to NATO. Actually, we will reach 2% in the year 2024, and it means that we will double, 100% up our military budget, because that's how the economy is growing practically for all of us. So the real story is, yes, we should have paid 2% because we promised. It doesn't mean we went in for free and we didn't pay every year more and more and more. And yes, all of us has the plan that we will go basically in a couple of 2 or 3 years to required 2%. The final sentence, there will be the countries where you never can expect them to go to 2%. My beloved example is the mighty European power of Luxembourg, which has the biggest size of the budget. And the Luxembourg defense minister says, if I go to 2%, I will have to buy for each soldier 2 tanks. So, devil is every time hidden in detail.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So before we let you go with our warm thanks, as I mentioned at the beginning of our session, for many years the United States, since you became free democracies, we've called on you for help many, many times, and you've always answered the call. And so here on behalf of the University of Virginia, we want to ask you to answer the call once again. This is a very important weekend for us here at the University of Virginia.
Oh, yes.
Because last night our basketball team went into the Final 8 of the NCAA. So we want your pledge, not for 2% of defense spending, but for your 100% of support for the Virginia Cavaliers and the NCAA tournament. And we have a special souvenir to help you remember this commitment.
Oh, right.
Please.
Right.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Can I say something about this?
Please.
I mentioned it. My 2 sons, they're studying in Germany. And last night, he sent me and my wife a short video about the basketball game. And I didn't pay attention at all to it. And today I'm discovering from Steve, it's exactly what my son was referring to. And just good luck. I know you're playing against Purdue. That's right. Tomorrow. And I know that this is the March Madness, and I hope at the end of the day, for the first time, you'll win. So let's keep on.
So once again, the Visegrad deliver. Thank you very much. Thank you for your wonderful time here. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.